Fallout, particularly Bethesda Fallout, gets a fair amount of flack for a number of narrative elements in the games. Among those is what I like to refer to as the raider problem. You know what a raider is. You probably envision someone cladded in leather armor, dirty, carrying cheap weapons, and ready to attack anything in front of them. But it does expand beyond that. Let's talk about the raider problem. So let's start off by defining what a raider really is in the context of a game element, because it's not as simple as a lawless person who loots to survive, though that is a lot of them. We'll look at your everyday official raider, no name, pointless, just there to attack other NPCs and the player, and we'll model our traits after them. They are humanoids that carry weapons, are always hostile, they are typically rather weak, though stronger variants may exist, they are rather numerous, and can be found about anywhere. Finally, they have little purpose to exist. That last point is where we get the raider problem from, little reason to exist in the world due to a lack of narrative importance. Under this, the cons of Fallout 1, the great cons of New Vegas, and the Nuka World Raiders of Fallout 4's Nuka World DLC wouldn't qualify despite legitimately being raiders. And a qualified raider group may not be raiders in the lore. They just act like them in gameplay. And that's fine. We're looking at raiders as a form of classification, not occupation. So to make this a little bit less confusing, this raider problem, I'm going to start referring to qualifying groups as gameplay raiders and the previously mentioned groups as plot raiders. What's the difference? Plot raiders have a purpose within the plot, usually pretty substantial. While these are normally official raider groups, they may not always be. Gameplay raiders exist for gameplay purposes. They're a humanoid enemy that's capable of using a variety of weapons and may have different stats depending on the faction that they belong to. They tend to not have any purpose beyond gameplay alone, though may have an excuse to exist in the lore. A consideration: while a plot raider may have many elements of a gameplay raider, such as constant aggression, the plot raiders have a purpose within the story and doesn't solely exist for gameplay purposes. Now, classifying what is and isn't a gameplay or plot raider can be a little challenging. Some are pretty clear-cut and dry, others not so much. Now, this isn't an all-encompassing list, just getting some examples. Some are a one-to-one comparison to a normal raider, but with a different title, like Bandits and Marauders in classic Fallout. Others, such as Vipers and Jackals in New Vegas, are also gameplay raiders. They serve no plot purpose in the game, but do at least have a backstory, primarily in the Fallout Bible. They were meant to appear in the original Fallout and even have some lines about their existence in the final product. And they were to have a significant amount of importance in the original Fallout 3 Van Buren, but ultimately they kept getting hit with the developmental axe. They do appear in the final product of New Vegas, but despite the heavy amount of Van Buren recycled ideas, they are little more than the standard nameless raider. Even New Vegas says as much. Then there are guys like the Talon Company and Gunners. They're both mercenary groups. And mercenaries are not guys who randomly loot stuff. They're guns for hire, armies. They get a contract, do a job, and get paid. Looting may be invoked during a job, but that's not their primary objective. It's about getting paid. But they don't really have much of a reason to exist in Fallout 3 or Fallout 4. They're needlessly hostile to the protagonist and seem to act more as a warning for bigger threats than actually being important themselves. You can't reason with them, can't hire them, can't do jobs with them, can't do jobs for them. They're functionally raiders, but do, at least, have something of a backstory present in the games. And to the Talon Company's credit, they'll tell you that someone put a hit on you if you had too much good karma. Though, even a neutral or bad karma lone wanderer will still get attacked in the DC ruins if you stumble upon them. However, despite those mild justifications, they're still gameplay raiders. The reason? Well, I pose a question. If this faction was removed from the game, would it really alter the storyline or world in a significant way? How significant? Would replacing them with an already existing group have the same outcome? Could the impact be rerouted? And for the two merc groups, it's really not that significant, particularly not the Talon Company. The Gunners only slightly more so due to two companions, McCready and Preston. And even then, only so much. McCready was a gunner, but he could have gotten a different job at some point, and the Battle Quincy would have to be changed from the Gunners to some other group. But ultimately, it would amount to about the same thing. But this question is also why I have two different thoughts about the super mutants. I see the super mutants in Fallout 3 as plot raiders, and see the super mutants in Fallout 4 as gameplay raiders. While both groups are hostile apart from a small selection of individuals, and both have all the qualifications of a typical raider, there is one exception. Fallout 4 super mutants, while yes, they're part of the Institute backstory, or more so, the Institute is used to justify their existence, if you remove the super mutants, not much really changes. Strong's gone, but honestly, that's about it. The overall plot is barely affected. Not so much with the super mutants in Fallout 3. They have a point to their existence. They're a prop piece to help explain why DC is in such a shamble. They're the primary focus group of Lion's Brotherhood until the Enclave show up. They're, as a group, the secondary antagonists of the game. They're important. Similarly, while the Scorch are a bunch of mindless pseudo-feral ghouls that can use guns, much like the Markmen, they're also important to the Appalachia's backstory, even if it's partly an excuse for the no human NPCs at launch. Then there are some that are kinda questionable. Let's take a look at the Fiends of New Vegas. How important are the Fiends really? They're another part of the equation to explain why the NCR is struggling so much in the Mojave, but they're pretty localized to one spot on the map. They have an important backstory to some characters, but they're not that important overall. They're stupidly hostile and bring out the worst characteristics of people's idea of a raider, one-dimensional in a lot of ways. But they also have lore about trading chems with the Great Khans. In fact, dressed as one, they treat you differently. Gameplay raider or plot raider? If we remove them, does it change the world of the Mojave Wasteland significantly or only mildly? What really dictates such significance? Maybe it would be better to not have such a binary look at the two categories. Perhaps a slider scale, with specific factions being more or less plot raiders than others. After all, everyone has different ideas, different considerations for categorization. As derogatory as it may seem, gameplay raiders do have a purpose. Not plot purpose, but the purpose of their name. Gameplay purpose. Largely, they're there for the player. Killing a raider is going to be a lot of first-time players' access to some halfway decent early game gear. Think about it. How many of you shoot up the cons in Fallout 1 for their leather armor? Or take out the raiders down in the school in Fallout 3? Or even take out the convicts in Prim? Moreover, as you go through the game, higher level raiders may start appearing. Or even guys like the Gunners or Talon Company Mercs who drop combat armor. Super mutants may be where you grab energy weapons. But besides being walking loot, they also exist to vary up the gameplay to some degree. Different gear, different health, different scenery. Still, it can feel a bit samey. Besides a different size hitbox, what's honestly the difference between fighting a gunner and fighting a super mutant? Not terribly much. And I think that's the real issue with gameplay raiders. That's all they really exist for. Fighting and looting. They have no real impact on the actual world, just different things to shoot at. That's not to say it's necessarily bad to have everyday violent raiders who exist only to attack the player. But is there a real purpose to having a name group doing so? Could these guys not fulfill the same purpose by simply just being called raiders, bandits, marauders, highwaymen, outlaws, rather than say the Grand Order of Oaths or the New Age Crankers? I suppose it's all a bit arbitrary anyways. Some enjoy what little backstory we get on named groups, despite the lack of actual storyline importance. For instance, while it's not vital to the story itself, the Battle of Quincy was a gunner operation. It just doesn't have a terrible deal of importance on its own. It establishes why Preston and friends are at Concord when you find them, but that's really about it. Are such groups truly underdeveloped? Missed opportunities? Do they actually conflict with the world story at large? Or are they so insignificant to set story, what little we learn about them is more of a treat than a problem? But that's for the player to consider, whether it's praise or criticism. So what do you guys think? And a special thanks to my channel members, especially my Members Thrice Over guys, like the Crazy Game Developer and Denny McPhee. And if you want to support me and join as well, I'd be more than happy. Also feel free to join my Discord server and chat with us. Thank you. Have a good one.